Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining today's webinar. My name is Shauna Cooper, and I'm the Director of Programs at Ribbon. We have an exciting session planned for you today in conjunction with the upcoming holidays. The title is Mental Health Support for People Living with HIV and in Recovery. Just want to share a little bit of information about Ribbon. Ribbon is a national nonprofit organization located in the DC metropolitan area. We have several national programs in which we primarily serve the persons living with HIV and persons living with HIV. So our primary responsibilities are in training and technical assistance. We do have a trauma inform program. We have a program in which we provide training and technical assistance to organizations who provide direct services, policy and advocacy work with persons aging with HIV. And those are people 50 years and older. And we also are the training and technical assistance provider for a group of organizations across the US who provide direct services for Black, cis, and transgender women. We host webinars regularly. We have social media platforms in which you can find us on Facebook. We have a Ribbon page and a Rock for Aging page. We ask you to follow us on social media. And lastly, we have a Community Voices YouTube page, which I will provide the link shortly as well. So without further ado, again, welcome. And I'm going to turn over the session to Denise, who is the program associate at Ribbon. Thank you.
Thank you, Shauna. Oh, see, I have a jumpy thing. So first of all, I just want to say thank you and welcome to everyone. And we want you to know that throughout this workshop, we'll be discussing topics that might be of a sensitive nature. And of course, you know, self-care is important. And has everybody seen the screen? Oh, what happened here?
Yes. You're good, Denise.
Oh, good. All right. So it might be topics of a sensitive nature or emotionally challenging, and it's important to prioritize your own well-being and practice self-care. You're free to participate at your comfort level, and all discussions are confidential. But if at any point you feel overwhelmed or need a break, please feel free to step out. Remember, taking care of yourself is essential, and we're here to support you in any way that we can. So just as an introduction to the topic, the holiday season can amplify feelings of isolation and stigma for people living with HIV and those in recovery from substance misuse. So family gatherings and social events may trigger loneliness, regrets, or even substance exposure. Alongside these emotional challenges, managing health and financial stress during this time can be overwhelming for some people. So this webinar offers strategies for mental health support to help individuals navigate these stressors, connect with supportive networks, and celebrate resilience for a healthier holiday experience. And with that, I'd like to introduce our first presenter, and that is Dr. Perry Helkaitis. Dr. Perry Helkaitis is an infectious disease epidemiologist, applied statistician, and public health psychologist dedicated to health equity, particularly for LGBTQ+ and minority populations. He serves as Dean Hunterdon Professor of Public Health and Health Equity and Distinguished Professor at Rutgers School of Public Health, where he also founded the Center for Health, Identity, Behavior, and Prevention Studies. His 3-decade career centers on infectious disease prevention and advocacy for those affected by HIV and the LGBTQ+ community. Dr. Helkaitis has authored 6 books and over 300 peer-reviewed articles. He serves as editor-in-chief of Behavioral Medicine and is founding editor of Annals of LGBTQ Public and Population Health. He frequently shares his expertise in mainstream media and has received numerous awards for his work. In 2023, his contributions were honored with the creation of the Perry N. Helkaitis, Endowed Chair in LGBTQ plus Public Health at Rutgers, ensuring ongoing focus on LGBTQ plus health. Dr. Helkaitis holds degrees in epidemiology, statistics, psychology, and education, and is actively involved on advisory boards and professional organizations, including as chair of the board of the Association of Schools and Programs of Public Health. And our second presenter will be Victoria Graves Cade. Victoria Graves Cade is a peer educator with a career at GMHC and a 29-year, I think more longer than 29-year HIV survivor. With a BA in psychology, she has over 27 years of experience in health and human services, HIV care, substance use, and mental health, retiring in 2012. But since 2017, she has been part of the ACREA, so she came back to work. Since 2017, she has been part of ACREA's Health Literacy for Older Adults initiative, focusing on community engagement, partnerships, organizational assessments, and consumer workshops on topics like sexual health and HIV prevention, specifically for older population. Victoria is active in numerous organizations, including the NCNW, National Council of Negro Women, Brooklyn section, Age Friendly Central Brooklyn, Emmanuel Baptist Church, Healing Touch HIV Ministry, the Borough of Brooklyn Faith HIV Task Force, and a National Minority AIDS Council, or NMAC, 50+ Strong and Healthy Scholar Program. She also serves on the National HIV and Aging Advocacy Network's Membership Committee, the New York Knows Women's Advisory Board, and the Black and Latina Subcommittee. Her mission is to end the HIV epidemic and stigma, bridge healthcare disparities, and empower Black and Brown women and save lives. So with that, I'm going to go back to Dr. Helkaitis. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And hold on just a second. Let me stop sharing. All right. So I'm going to let you share your slides, Dr. Helkaitis. Is that right?
Yep.
Okay, great.
Let me just make sure I've got them all here. And we're all good. We can see those, Denise?
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you, Denise. Good to be here with Victoria and all of you. I always feel when I work with community-based organizations that I'm home. Like living the life of an academic is interesting, but the real work we do is in the community. Like Victoria, I am a long-term survivor of HIV. I was actually talking about that with somebody this morning. And I think that, my talk today is going to really focus on the power that we as HIV positive people bring to the table in confronting all of the realities we face on a daily basis in our lives, including the events of the last 2 weeks, which has many of us completely out of our minds in a little bit. So let me start there and first say to you that I want to do some background, first of all, on drug use and HIV, just as a context, then dive into ideas about the holidays and strategies for working with the holidays, and then sort of end with something that I've been talking about a lot the last few years, which is what is the role of hate in perpetuating diseases in our communities. So we know all too well that there's this co-occurrence of drug use and mental health across the United States, both in HIV positive people and people who are not living with HIV. And this has been documented with regard to HIV from the very, very early days of AIDS, from the AIDS epidemiological catchment study from the 1980s. Substance use treatment programs have typically reported that upwards of 75% of people who are in treatment also have a mental health challenge, and these include depression, anxiety, PTSD, psychotic conditions, and personality disorders. And I've been known to say many, many times in my talks to my students and in other situations, people just don't come to substance use for no reason. People come to substance use for a reason. And one of those reasons may be their mental health challenges that are going undiagnosed. We also know that there are these social conditions that fuel these states, including poverty and homelessness. And we know that people who have mental illness and substance use co-occurring are often at higher risk for HIV. Some of the most common substances we all know that people are using who are HIV positive include alcohol, Valium, and Xanax. marijuana, both illicit and illicit substances, club drugs, opioids, and stimulants. And these contribute to the poor health of HIV positive people. These complex social needs and the complexities of people's lives who are living with HIV not only are about their mental health and their physical health, but it's also about their social health. And when we talk about the intersection of those three things, we're talking about not only the needs that and the realities that people are facing, including poverty and unemployment and homelessness, multiple forms of violence because of the different identities people hold, but also the stigma and discrimination that substance users and HIV positive people experience, the lack of access to a healthcare system, which may get remarkably worse in the next 4 years, all leading to poor adherence to HIV treatment. And as we all know, all of us here in this room all know, the success in us being able to eradicate HIV is in large part, of course, contingent on the use of pre-exposure prophylaxis and safer strategies, but also keeping HIV positive people undetectable, because keeping HIV positive people undetectable has a personal benefit for the HIV positive person, but also a community and societal benefit for all of us. When we think about mental health in the population of people living with HIV, we see like some stark differences. People with HIV in some studies have been reported to experience major depression at about 36%, as compared to 7% for the non-positive population. Anxiety disorder at 16% versus 2% in the general population. Among those who are seeking mental health services, HIV rates are higher, testing rates are higher. So in studies that have been undertaken where people are seeking mental health services and they test them for HIV, we're getting a 4.8% seropositivity rate. As compared to the general population, we're getting a 0.2%. And this is not just a phenomenon in the United States. We know that around the world, including places like South Africa, China, Uganda, where HIV continues to be prevalent, mental health issues and substance use issues are higher in people living with HIV or at risk for HIV than the general population. So I think about this as a triple threat: the stigmas that HIV positive people often experience, the stigma of HIV, the stigma of substance use, the stigma of mental health burden, right? And so these stigmas come in combination, exacerbate each other, they synergize each other, they catalyze each other, and they create feelings in people, emotions in people, including but not limited to loneliness and isolation. And they impact the ability of HIV positive people to manage their HIV. They interfere with their healthcare. They interfere with their uptake of their medications. They interfere with the possibility of breastfeeding. All of these things come together because of the stigmas that society creates. Now, here we are in the holiday season, and we know that about 24% of people diagnosed with mental illness find the holiday season makes their condition a lot worse, and 40% somewhat worse. Why is that? Because of the financial stressors, because there's too much pressure, because there are unrealistic expectations, because there's a focus on past happiness, because they're unable to be with loved ones. And these high expectations, loneliness, and stressors can lead to what's called the holiday blues that last anywhere from Thanksgiving to New Year's. But we know, all of us in this room know, that for HIV positive people, those blues can exist all throughout the year. They're just particularly heightened, and that we pay particular attention at this time of year because there's all of this going on in our lives. I will say that I imagine that for some of us, this holiday season will be even more challenging given the events of the last 2 weeks, because now we've created a reality in our country it's going to perhaps make it even more difficult for those populations who are often marginalized: women, people of color, LGBTQ people, people living with HIV, people with substance use issues, to get the care and the support that they need. This is my favorite slide. And I put this slide up kind of like tongue in cheek, right? Because it is the hallmark effect. When you look at those pictures of all those television shows that are there. I mean, look at those people. So it's very easy to look at those and say, what is wrong with me? Why is my life not like this? Will I have a happily ever after? And what it does is reinforce feelings of isolation, stigma, and othering that HIV positive people very often face. Experiencing the holiday blues leads to feelings of sadness, fatigue, tension, frustration, loneliness, isolation, sense of loss, dissatisfaction, hopelessness, and overwhelming stress. But I want us to come back to this idea again that it's not just the social by itself or the emotional by itself or the biological by itself, but these three domains where people living with HIV interact with each other, right? So we have the physical realities of HIV, including chronic pain, including inflammation, interacting with mental health burdens and body dysmorphia and potentially state-sanctioned and other and illicit drug use, and the social, the isolation, the familial rejection. These things don't happen alone, right? People may experience for example, digestion of complex meals may be worse for people who have body dysmorphia and who are feeling familial rejection. That in order for us to be able to treat an individual, to treat an HIV positive individual, to treat an HIV positive individual in recovery, it's not enough to focus on just one domain. We must focus on all three domains together. And this is what I would call a holistic approach that the community-based organizations, including yours, truly understand in dealing with people with HIV. One of the main culprits for all of this that is going on with HIV positive people is due to seasonal affect disorder. Seasonal affect disorder is more common in the winter, especially for those of us who live up here in the north. It's a type of depression that gets worse throughout the winter when it's cold and when it's dark and gloomy out. There's ways to control it, including natural light. I, for example, in my home, as I bring my plants in during the winter, also change all my light bulbs, all of my lights to one of those full spectrum light bulbs that gives access to natural sunlight during the day. Okay. Now, the other thing I wanted to sort of talk about a little bit today is this idea of the winter holidays and aging. Because as we know right now we know that for people living with HIV, there are, of course, these three sets of conditions that go on, right? And for people who are older, age-related comorbidities are worse. Chronic inflammation. People who are older also experience isolation at higher rates. They experience financial burdens at higher rates. They experience fragile social networks, and they experience death and loss at higher rates. So when we think about the population of people who are living with HIV who are ages 50 and older, which is somewhere about 50% in our country, we're not only thinking about the effects of HIV and substance use and social conditions, but also of aging and how well we're being able to manage all of that. In this chart, which is data from the CDC, I know it's a lot. What I'm really trying to show you here is that, just because one is older doesn't mean things get better. In some ways, things stay the same or get worse, whether it is just general self-rated health, or it is being able to reach an undetectable viral status, or it is having food insecurity, unemployment, and unstable housing, or it is having unmet mental health needs. Some 17% of people 55 and older, 1 in 5, report inability to get the mental health services that they need in their lives. If people who are 55 to 64, only 68 of the 100 who are living with HIV get to a viral suppression. And as we get older, from 65 and older, it goes down to 64. So age adds another wrinkle, no pun intended, to the equation that we have to deal with, especially because we are in some ways fortunate to have art that means we can live long, fulfilled lives. But living long, fulfilled lives also comes with the complications of aging, and we're only beginning to understand how aging and HIV interact with each other. I think also that one of the things that makes matters a little more complicated during the season is in the middle of it, we have World AIDS Day. And while World AIDS Day is an incredible day, and it is a time of commemoration, right, of those and who've not survived this day, or who are living every day to the fullest possible way that they can, it also creates a sense of sadness, loss, and vulnerability for people who are living with HIV, and for some is a re-traumatizing event. So what are we going to do? What are we going? What are my suggestions to people who are living with HIV, regardless of their age? People who have mental health issues, people who are experiencing, substance use. Well, here is just a a very small set of guidelines. One needs to manage one's expectations. Not building these big fantastical dreams of what the holidays are going to be like. Second, acknowledging the realities in their lives, recognizing what they can do, what they can afford, how they can move, setting boundaries, setting healthy boundaries. If I mean, over the course of the last few years, I will disclose something here. I have removed from my life those people who are haters, because those are the people who I cannot have in my life, even though I've known them for a very long time. It's also another way to get through the season is to express gratitude, engage in self-care, connect socially with your network. That doesn't have to be your family. It could be whatever your network is. Practice moderation and continue, most importantly, for HIV positive people, maintaining their healthy routines, maintaining their medication uptake and their adherence, maintaining their healthy eating, maintaining their exercise, maintaining as much as possible all of those things. And if not possible, to not engage in substance use and those things, to do those things in a harm reduction way. There's ways that we can continue to engage with those behaviors that are not as harmful. And I am not a fan of complete abstinence. I don't think that works, but there is a way to harm. Maybe I don't have like 5 pieces of pumpkin pie. Right? How about I just have 2 pieces of pumpkin pie? I mean, that's an exaggeration and a silly example, but that is something to think about. Or maybe instead of having 3 glasses of wine, I have 1 glass of wine. And I think for HIV positive people, that is extremely important, because very often we find ourselves indulging in things as a way of coping with the realities that we're facing every day in our lives. As Denise said early on, I think resilience is one of those things that is really powerful for HIV positive people. And this is a model my team and I created years ago and tested out, where we think about how HIV therapy, aging, and psychosocial and social structural states create diminished health. But the resilience we have, and resilience is one of those interesting things, right? Because you want people to have resilience, but you don't want people to have gone through hellish things in their life to get to be resilient. But people living with HIV have resilience. And I think that what we need to do is to tap into that resilience, because the resilience creates protection against the negative outcomes. Let me give my final thoughts here and then turn it over to my colleague. The last few years, I've really been thinking that you all know that there's a large literature in public health that talks about social determinants of health, right? All of the social conditions that make things bad. I think the big one is hate. And I have been working in this area for the last couple of years, trying to write about it and think about it, and to think about that people who hold multiple identities, including identities of HIV positive, have attacks on them. They experience hate. And these experiences of hate, these stressors created by hate, heighten the health burdens that HIV positive people face, heighten the burdens that somebody who's not HIV positive, but who is a woman, or who is a migrant, or who is, a young Black man growing up here in Newark, are experiencing because of the identities that they hold. And so we need to brace ourselves, right? Because the hate rhetoric is out there and is potentially going to get worse over the next 4 years. And we know all too well that unless we're putting barriers up to diminish that hate, that people's health is going to be also undermined. So we can think about hate as an infectious disease. And we need to then, if it is an infectious disease, if it is like a virus, if it is like a bacteria, and it crosses barriers and it crosses cultures and it crosses people, then we need to attack hate. Because if we attack hate, the health outcomes will be better. And it also affects various systems of the body. Not only does hate create conditions that make people sick, but it actually, through their behaviors, but also affects one's nervous system, immune system, and endocrine system. And we know for HIV positive people whose immune systems are already very fragile, having experiences of hate that are triggering will make things worse. So public health and healthcare must address hate, and we must develop interventions and programs that acknowledge and challenge hate to protect and enhance the health of all people and populations. And a call on all of us in the next 4 years, especially, to be fearless about these things and not to be silent. It is not, I know I will admit that after the last few weeks, I took a break from everything, but now I'm ready again. And I think we all needed to cocoon for a little while. We needed to like watch garbage TV, which I did a lot of, to eat candy, which I did a lot of, but now I'm back. And I was talking about that with my therapist today. Like I feel like I'm rekindled because we have a big challenge ahead of us. So thank you for inviting me. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to be part of this group. And if you want to learn more about what we're doing, you can follow us on all of those lovely social networks. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. That was so wonderful. So many good thoughts. I didn't even think about the fact that World AIDS Day is right smack dab in the middle of the holiday season. And I always feel some sort of way and didn't know why. So that's something to think about. And I like that you addressed hate. So I'm going to open the floor before we go on to the next presentation. If anyone has any thoughts or anything they'd like to ask the doctor.
Or how about they can ask Perry? How about that?
They can ask Perry. Please do. What I saw in the chat so far is they want your slides.
Oh, yeah, you can have my slides for sure. Yep, absolutely. No, it's interesting because usually when I do these talks, it's like, oh, I've got something somewhere. But this was one that I had to put together and I wanted to put together. And somehow I wanted to take out all my anger on Hallmark in a way. And now I got to do it. So now I feel like more fulfilled. I see Melanie's hand.
Melanie.
Harry, you hit on the nose, the head, the hammer on the nail, all the things that have been bubbling up inside me even before November 5th.
Mm-hmm.
But the slides, I'm telling you, expressed it beautifully. And if I tried to redo your talk, I could not do it without those slides because these points need to be taken to providers, to therapists. There are people who need to know that hate and the stigma is not just a linear stigma. You had triple plus, and then you addressed it. You could be 8, 9, 10 different levels of stigma affecting you. And hate, I mean, supersedes all of those because I'm just so pleased to have been invited and that I got to attend. And hey, I want to get to know you personally because we can have some great conversations.
Yeah. And I think, Melanie, thank you for those lovely, lovely, lovely words. And just say that, nobody's immune from stigma, like no one. I think of myself as an almost 62-year-old. Really? 62? Come on, somebody say that. Almost
really? 62?
Perfect. Thank you for that. Almost 62, self-actualized, pretty self-actualized gay man, right? I grew up in New York City. I had loving parents. I've learned to deal with my HIV for 40 something years. Yet I get in an Uber a few weeks ago and the driver starts to talk to me about having a wife and having a children. And I completely denied my identity. And so here I am, like Mr. Big Professor Dean guy, right? And I'm experiencing it. And this is all to say that I think, Melanie, and all of you, you're right. Like, these are the kinds of messages we need to drive home to healthcare providers, mental health, physical health providers, that people experience every day of their lives. They don't think about these stressors that people experience. They don't think about these microaggressions that we see every single day of our lives. And if you're a 5-year-old child right now and you're coming of age, and I mean, for those of you who are LGBTQ or feel different because of what some other aspect of your identity, you're grappling at 5, what's going on with me? You turn on that TV, I don't know if people turn on TVs anymore. You turn on that Instagram and something, and you see the rhetoric of hate, it's going to make life much more complicated for you. So we have to watch out for that generation too, because that generation remains really vulnerable for the future. So thank you, Melanie. Victoria, I see your hand.
Wow. Wow, wow, wow. And I definitely echo what Melanie said about your slides and how you presented it. And to think, about that whole hate piece as a you called it a social determinant, and I think about how the hate is coming across because of what happened a couple of weeks ago and what we experienced for a while now, and how it coincides with the mob mentality,
Mm-hmm.
and we saw that play out on January 6th.
Mm-hmm.
How normal people supposedly just acted like a bunch of raving lunatics,
Mm-hmm.
and how that hate is going to fester because of all the talk about it and all the different negativity that's going on, and how that really comes over you. And couple that with already feeling those things when the winter comes and not wanting to
Right.
go out and isolated and can't get with family, or you're losing family members. So overwhelming.
You know what I've been thinking about lately, Victoria? Like when I allow myself 10 minutes of news a day now. I'm slowly, incrementally making it more, right? It's like baby steps here, right? I'll eventually get up to an hour soon. When I saw the picture of that cabinet coming in, and I was like, what's the message? Well, there's a perfect example of hate. Look at that cabinet. Look at what those folks look like. You know, and I was in a meeting here yesterday with my colleagues, and some very not wise person said, "Well, I don't think they'll be able to do a lot of this stuff. The people who should be really, really, the ones who are going to be most at risk are migrants." And my response was like, "Unless you're like a white, rich, straight Christian guy, the rest of us are under attack. So you can live with that false reality, but we know what we're up for." And I did a podcast last week also, and they were like, "What do you think the next 4 years are going to be like?" I'm like, "Well, we have evidence for what it was like before. Why do we think the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior?" And we know what it was like, and it's playing out. And I think the hate thing, we got to stay on that, because I think that is very, very, very powerful and accessible to people. And I'll tell you, I came up with this initiative in memory of my mom, who was this wonderful Greek immigrant woman who, did her best, to like raise us all. And she always used to say to me in her little, like, what she referred to as her Sophia Loren accent, she would say, "Perry Moo, we don't hate people. We don't like people, but we never say hate." And then it just like stayed with me for the rest of my life. And I think there was so much power and truth in this words of this woman who came over to the United States when she was like 16 years old and had like a fifth grade education. That power is something and that intelligence is something I strive for every day. So thank you for your comments, Victoria.
Thank you. So with that, we're going to segue right into Victoria's talk, because she's going to, yes, you. She's going to share a lived experience, which is always great. Victoria.
Okay, so my lived experience, no questions. I was a little thrown off.
Whatever I sent you, I cannot access. So
Oh, okay.
if you have those,
I do.
okay, then just roll with it.
Okay.
Thank you.
So Denise and I were talking about some talking points, and things that go on over the holidays that I've experienced. I'm in recovery now 33 years. And early on, the holidays, other people can drink, I can't, and that I had to just get into my head so that I'm not making people feel uncomfortable. But one of the things that I had to do for myself when I talk about self-care is my home group had alcothons. And early on in my recovery, I lived in that alcohol from 9 in the morning to 5 p.m. And by the time I got home, everybody had eaten and whatever. And I just had to say hello, have dessert, and go where I was. That's how I took care of myself, because I wasn't really that comfortable, even though I did a moral inventory of myself. And like Perry was talking about, there are things of why we use substances. I understood that when I did that moral inventory, but however, how that was going to play out in family is a whole different thing. So I had to get honest with my family. So a lot of times I had to remove myself. and not to be rude or not to make anybody uncomfortable, to protect myself. And so that they could enjoy themselves. Because I didn't want them to think, oh, we're going to have one or we're going to have this. And don't do it around Victoria, which my family called me Vicky. Don't do it around them. Don't do it around her. So I had to be honest with them and let them know that when I remove myself, it's not applied on them. They can do what they want. I have to take care of myself. So, like I said in the beginning, the alkathons are real important to me. Even to this day, I still make an alkathon. I don't have to be there all day, but I still go to fortify myself. And just to be around like-minded people that are going through some of the same things that I do when the holidays come around. But the most important thing I would say is being honest with yourself. And if it's family members and friends, being honest with them. Now, will everybody, go along with it? Will everybody understand? Probably not. Up until my brother-in-law passed away, he would still offer beer. You want a beer? When you come to his house, you want a beer? And whether or not it was intentional or he just thinks everybody's supposed to have a beer when it's around the holidays, but that was him, so I had to limit the times that I would go visit. And some of the other things I use, for like self-care is so important. However, my self-care came over the years into retail therapy. I don't know if anybody understands that. So I have all these boxes of little things and trinkets and stuff that I buy when the holidays come, and I'm supposed to be giving them as gifts, but they end up with me. And so learning to balance that. I don't drink, I don't drug, I don't overeat, but I do like sweets. But that retail therapy, I'm really grappling with. And so that's what I took on. And so I'm working on that in moderation. And talking to my sponsor, and I have a network of people like Denise that I can talk to. If things are going on and I'm not able to really, work it through on my own, I can talk with Denise. I can talk with other people in my life to work through things. Very important, because, if you're doing your own thinking and you're answering yourself, that's not a good thing. So, gathering a network of people that you can trust, that when you say something to them, it doesn't go all over the place, or that you feel like it's going all over the place. People that you can trust to talk with about those inner things that maybe some other people won't understand. Self-care. And I think at the root of all of that is being honest with yourself, knowing your limitations, knowing your triggers, and just being comfortable with saying, you know what, I can't go to that. My cousin invited me over, but in the past, Perry talked about, what people have done in the past, a lot of times they don't change, So I'm sorry, I can't go to that. Knowing how to say no, knowing how to set boundaries for yourself. Like I say, my family maybe they can drink, I cannot. And I don't I don't play with that. I don't, have to make up any stories about I cannot. And my friends understand that. A lot of times, a lot of the people in my life now don't drink, don't drug. So, that happens. You move away from one thing and move into something a little more positive. Know where you're going. Don't just show up to places without being prepared beforehand. Know where you're going, know who you're going to be dealing with, and be prepared, and be prepared. Like my father used to give me 2 quarters. That's when they had pay phones, and he would give me $20, and he called it mad money. So that anytime something happened while I was out, and it wasn't working out, I had mad money to say, I can leave, I can catch a cab and get home. I got a quarter, I can drop in the pay phone and call him and say, you know what, this is not working out. I'm on my way home. Just keep an eye out. So having that, now we call it toolkits, but just having those things in place to protect yourself, to do self-care so that you could be successful over the holiday season. Thank you.
Yeah, Victoria, when you mention alkathons, for those that may not be familiar with that term, what are you referring to when you talk about that?
I'm referring to Alcohol Anonymous. My home group and some other home groups have this alkathon where they have sometimes 24-hour meetings, sometimes they're from 9 to 6, and they have a dinner, because with Thanksgiving there's dinner, with Christmas there's dinners. So they would have meetings from 9 in the morning to 9 at night. We break for dinner, we break bread together, and then you go back to another meeting, and that can go on for the whole day. And so, you
Keep you
can come
occupied.
all day, or you could go for an early meeting, go home and come back. But that's what I mean when I talk about an alkathon.
Very good. So I also am a person in recovery, and I remember part of our recovery process would be to have somebody you call a sponsor, and they would be responsible for keeping you out all day. I would get so tired. They would drag me from meeting to meeting, or they would take me to Coney Island. They would take me. I was too exhausted to use. I tell you the truth. And then you just wake up and do the same thing again. So thank you so much for sharing that, Victoria. It brought to mind things that happened for me as well. So if there are any questions for Victoria, or any remaining questions, anybody would like to share anything that comes to mind around the holidays, what maybe some techniques that you incorporate into your life when you're positive and might have some strained family relationships. How do you navigate that? If anybody would like to share, we'd be glad to hear it. Melanie?
I
Okay.
just want to thank Victoria and you, Denise, for being open and vulnerable to sharing your personal experience for you, Victoria, alcohol, and how being around people who you called them like-minded, but it might not have been like-minded, but they needed the same type of support as you did. And going to I never heard of an alkathon, but I heard of 24-hour meetings. They just didn't call it alkathons, but that's a good that's a good description. I never thought of it like that, but I do appreciate that. That you had to explain to your family members that you weren't being rude or disrespecting them at all. You know what your boundary needed to be in order to stay sober. So that took a lot of courage, because it's hard to talk to people that you know and your family members more than it is a stranger or people that you don't really have close ties with. It's easier to tell them, but your people close to you, it's hard to um, reveal your boundaries. And a lot of times, even though you're comfortable with it, they're not. But I really appreciate that.
If there are no further thoughts or comments or questions, or anybody would like to share, I don't see any hands. I'm going to turn it back over to Shauna, because she dropped in the chat an evaluation link, and we really appreciate your thoughts on this webinar today. Shauna?
Yes, thank you, Denise. I would like to thank both parties in the panel for a outstanding webinar.
I
So
love it.
if we can all give them like a virtual applause, that would be great. I mean, it was outstanding.
It
I
was.
like the what I appreciate is the context of the information that was provided. how simple it was explained, how it resonated. Sometimes when we have clinicians and behavioralists to come on, it can get a little technical, but this was so refreshing to hear and witness. I just want to say thank you for that, Dr. Halkitis. And
Thank you.
also, just thank you for sharing your personal experience. We appreciate you doing that as well, both to you and Victoria. It's a nice pairing with respect to the topic at hand. So again, thank you. We will be in contact for future educational opportunities because it can't just be this one, right? We'll love to share this information. Anyhow,
Don't forget to send the slides.
I got it.
Absolutely.
I got you.
The value.
We have
link-
someone saying that they can't access the link.
They can access the link.
John?
I was able
Huh.
to just complete the evaluation.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. If you just click on the link, you should be able to, no, it's, if you look at the, okay, it says it can't be reached.
Mm.
I tell you what, I'll send this in a separate email, but if you click on the link, you should be able to exit. I'm not sure what's going on, but I will send that evaluation link out. So thank you for putting your email in. Again, thank you for attending, everyone, for taking time out of your schedule. And lastly, thank you for Denise for putting this webinar together. You did a fantastic job. Without further ado, we're going to bid everyone adieu and be safe in your travels, and hope you have a good rest of your day. Thank you.